22 years of loyal service does not give you the right to throw away $85,000 on overpriced code. That was the line. That was the exact sentence CEO Richard Sterling barked across the mahogany table on a gray, rainy Tuesday morning. He slapped my $85,000 enterprise software proposal onto the dark wood so hard that black coffee sloshed over the rims of 3 ceramic cups. 14 senior executives sat around the long glass-walled boardroom of Apex Logistics, completely motionless. Outside, heavy rain beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Nobody said a word. Nobody even looked me in the eye. Richard pointed a heavy, gold-ringed finger directly at my chest. Standing right beside his leather chair was Julian Croft. Julian was a 29-year-old MBA graduate, wearing a tailored 3-piece suit, polished shoes, and a slick, practiced smile. Richard had spent the last 6 months grooming Julian to take over corporate operations, treating him like the brilliant son he never had. "Look at this proposal," Richard sneered, glancing around the room to gather approval from his timid executive team. "Samuel wants us to hand over $85,000 for a bloated, useless patch. He's a dinosaur, clinging to obsolete systems because he refuses to adapt to modern business. He thinks because he's been sitting in his office for 2 decades, he gets a blank check to waste company capital on tech fluff. My name is Samuel Carter. I am 48 years old, and for 22 years, I have been the lead systems architect at Apex Logistics." I sat perfectly still in my chair. When you spend half your life building and monitoring complex logistics networks, you learn to keep your voice quiet and your pulse slow. "Richard," I said, keeping my tone completely calm and controlled, "that $85,000 isn't a luxury upgrade. It's a bridge patch. Our shipping matrix has expanded 300% over the past 18 months. The original base core was never designed to process that volume. If we don't install that bridge before the heavy weekend freight drive, the entire database will lock up. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when." Richard didn't listen to a single word I said. He laughed, a short, ugly sound that echoed in the cold room. "You're paranoid, Samuel," Richard said coldly. "And frankly, you're out of touch. You've gotten soft, lazy, and overly expensive. Effective immediately, I am stripping you of your title as lead systems architect. You are removed from all infrastructure control. Julian is taking over complete operational management today." Julian stepped forward, resting his hands on the edge of the mahogany table. He looked down at me with pure condescension. "Don't take it personally, Samuel," Julian said softly, his voice full of fake sympathy. "Tech guys always struggle when real business leaders step in. We need lean, agile management now. We don't have room in our budget for $85,000 fear-mongering." Richard leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. "If you want to stay on as a low-level maintenance worker at half your current salary, you can submit an application to HR. Otherwise, hand over your primary access keycards and get out of my building." 14 senior executives stared down at their legal pads. Not a single person spoke up to defend the man who had kept their systems running for 22 years. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my chair against the wall. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the heavy silver master keycard to the main server cluster, and laid it quietly on the polished wood. "It's all yours, Julian," I said gently. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. Behind me, Richard and Julian thought they had just won a great corporate victory. They had no idea that they had just pulled the foundation out from under their own building, setting off an invisible countdown to total operational collapse. I walked down the carpeted hallway to my office on the third floor. My hands weren't shaking. My chest felt tight, but inside my mind, everything was dead quiet. I sat behind my wooden desk, looking at the bare walls. There were no shiny trophies or awards, just a framed photo of my wife, Sarah, smiling on a beach 3 years ago, and a picture of my daughter, Emily, on her high school graduation day. For 22 years, this room was my second home. When I started at Apex Logistics back in 2002, the company was a tiny dispatch outfit with 12 delivery trucks and a broken spreadsheet system. The founders were desperate. I was 26 years old, hungry, and willing to work 70 hours a week. I built our core routing database from scratch, writing thousands of lines of custom code late into the night in a cold basement room. As the company grew from 12 trucks to 3,000 freight rigs crossing 48 states, executives came and went. Flashy VPs in expensive suits accepted multi-million-dollar bonuses for unprecedented corporate growth. Meanwhile, I stayed downstairs, making sure the digital engine under their feet never missed a beat. People ask why a man stays 22 years when disrespect becomes a daily hum. The answer is simple: life happens. 4 years ago, Sarah was diagnosed with a serious medical condition. The hospital bills wiped out a huge portion of our savings. On top of that, Emily was accepted into a top engineering university, with tuition costs that made my stomach turn. I needed the steady paycheck and health insurance. So I swallowed my pride and endured the slights from younger, louder men who thought shouting in meetings was the same as managing a company. What Richard Sterling and Julian Croft failed to understand was how the business actually functioned. Logistics software isn't like a phone app you update with one click. Over 2 decades, Apex bought dozens of off-the-shelf software tools to track inventory, driver schedules, and fuel costs. None of those programs could talk directly to each other. To make them work, I spent 20 years writing custom bridge software, what tech professionals call ghost code. Ghost code is the invisible glue connecting old, legacy systems with modern cloud servers. It sits in the background, translating millions of data points every second. Nobody sees it. It just works. The $85,000 project Richard rejected wasn't a luxury upgrade. It was a critical security bridge. Our freight volume had grown so fast that the ghost code was running at 99% capacity. Data packets were piling up like cars in a massive traffic jam. The $85,000 was meant to buy specialized server bandwidth and install an automated relief valve. Without that valve, the moment heavy weekend shipping traffic hit its peak, the data traffic jam would cause a total system collision. Memory banks would corrupt, routing nodes would freeze, and 3,000 trucks would lose their digital maps at once. I was the only person alive who understood how those hidden layers worked. I was the only one who knew where the digital fault lines were buried. By stripping me of my position, Richard and Julian had sliced through the central nerve of their own business. I packed the photos of Sarah and Emily into a small cardboard box, along with my desk lamp. For 22 years, I had protected Apex Logistics from its own foolishness. Whenever an executive made a reckless promise to a client, I worked through the night to make the system deliver. Standing in my empty office, a profound clarity washed over me. I was done shielding toxic leaders from the consequences of their own ignorance. I closed the cardboard box, turned off the light, and pulled the door shut behind me. Before I could even tape the top of my cardboard box shut, my office door swung open. Julian Croft stepped into the room. He didn't knock. He carried a silver laptop under his arm, looking around my office with an air of complete ownership. "Packing up already, Samuel?" Julian said, leaning against the doorframe. "Smart move. We need to clear this space by tomorrow morning. My new design team needs to repaint these walls. I kept my hands flat on my desk and looked at him. The room is yours, Julian. He walked over to my main computer terminal, which was still running live diagnostic sweeps of our regional routing servers. He looked at the screen, tapping his chin with a gold pen. Let's get one thing straight, Julian said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Tech guys like you make a classic mistake. You build these overly complicated systems so you can feel indispensable. You build fake emergencies to justify bloated budgets. In modern agile business, we trim the fat. He sat down in my leather chair, grabbed my mouse, and clicked through the system menus. He opened the queue where my $85,000 patch was scheduled to run at midnight. Watch how easy this is, Julian said with a smirk. With 2 clicks, he hit the delete button. A dialog box popped up on the screen asking for confirmation. Julian clicked yes without hesitation. The scheduled system update vanished from the server memory. There, Julian said, turning in the chair to face me with a broad, victorious grin. I just saved Apex Logistics $85,000 in 30 seconds. That money goes straight to our bottom line quarterly profits. And frankly, it locks in my mid-year performance bonus. That is how real business is done. I stared at the blank screen where my life-saving patch used to sit. Deep down, a cold chill ran through my spine, but my face remained completely motionless. I didn't try to stop him. I didn't plead with him. A moment later, a representative from Human Resources stepped into the room, carrying a blue folder. She looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as she laid the severance agreement on the desk. Standard exit paperwork, Samuel, she said quietly. 2 months of severance pay, provided you sign the liability release today. I picked up the documents and read through every single line. As my eyes scanned the legal fine print, I almost laughed out loud. The corporate legal team had made a massive, arrogant mistake. Because Richard and Julian viewed me as an obsolete, low-level technician who held no real market value, they had used a basic, cookie-cutter exit template. They had completely forgotten to attach a standard non-compete clause. There were no restrictions on where I could work, who I could talk to, or what company I could join. They thought I was so useless that I posed zero competitive threat to their business. I took out my pen and signed my name on the final page in clean, sharp ink. Before I picked up my cardboard box, I turned to my personal terminal one last time. I quietly revoked my private, high-level developer administrative privileges. I left all standard corporate administrator access completely untouched for Julian. He had the front door key, but he had no idea where the hidden fuse box was located. Julian stood up, fixing his silk tie in my desk mirror. "Thanks for 22 years of service, Samuel," he said patronizingly. "Don't worry about Apex. Anyone with a basic computer science degree can run this building." I didn't say a single word. I picked up my cardboard box, walked down the quiet hallway, and stepped out into the pouring rain. I put the box in the trunk of my car, got into the driver's seat, and closed the door. The sound of rain hitting the windshield was heavy and rhythmic. I placed my hands on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and started the engine. 48 hours from now, the heavy weekend shipping rush would hit Apex's unpatched servers. I put my car in drive, pulled out of the parking lot, and left them to their fate. 48 hours after walking out of Apex Logistics, I was sitting at my kitchen table on a quiet Thursday evening. Outside, the rain had stopped, replaced by a cool twilight breeze. I had a warm mug of black coffee in my hands and a legal pad resting in front of me. I was outlining my next career moves, working out how to manage my household expenses while Sarah continued her medical treatments. At 7:15, my phone vibrated against the wooden table. An unlisted private number flashed on the screen. I answered calmly. Samuel Carter. Samuel. It's Harlan Reed, a deep, weathered voice said on the line. My heart gave a brief, steady knock against my ribs. Harlan Reed was a living legend in our industry. He was 62 years old, built like a brick wall, and was the founder and CEO of Titan Logistics, Apex's primary and fiercest market rival. For 2 decades, Titan and Apex had fought tooth and nail for dominance over the national supply chain matrix. Good evening, Mr. Reed, I said respectfully. I hear you're a free agent as of Tuesday afternoon, Harlan said, cutting straight to the point. I want to buy you dinner, tonight. 8 o'clock at Blackwood Steakhouse downtown. Private room in the back. I'll be there, I replied. An hour later, I was sitting across from Harlan in a dimly lit leather booth dining room. Harlan cut into a thick steak, swallowed, and set his fork down, looking at me with sharp, intelligent blue eyes. Samuel, Harlan began, leaning forward on his elbows. I'm not going to play games with you. I've been trying to poach you from Richard Sterling for the last 5 years. Every headhunter I hired told me the same thing. Samuel Carter is fiercely loyal to Apex, and he won't take a meeting, so I stopped asking. But the moment my legal team confirmed you walked out that door without a non-compete clause, I made this call. Richard thought I was obsolete, I said quietly. Harlan snorted, shaking his head in disbelief. Richard Sterling is a fool who got rich on your hard work. Industry insiders know who built Apex's network from the ground up. You did. Your routing code is the only reason Apex didn't go bankrupt 10 years ago. Harlan reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the table toward me. Here is my offer, Harlan said. Senior Vice President of Technology at Titan Logistics. Base salary of $250,000 a year. Full health cover for you and your family. Performance bonuses. Substantial equity options. And absolute authority over our entire digital infrastructure. No mid-level managers breathing down your neck. You answered directly to me. I stared at the numbers on the paper. It was more than double what Apex had ever paid me. Harlan, I said slowly, before I accept anything, you need to know why Richard demoted me. I asked for an $85,000 budget for a specialized bridge patch to handle database volume spikes. Richard called it overpriced trash, and his new VP deleted the project. Harlan stopped mid-breath. He stared at me for 3 full seconds, then let out a booming laugh that shook the glasses on our table. $85,000? Harlan laughed, wiping his eyes with a napkin. Is he insane, Samuel? Titan spent $4 million last year trying to build a custom routing patch to handle high-volume data collisions. Our third-party contractors failed miserably and blew through the entire budget. You built a working bridge patch for $85,000, and Richard Sterling fired you over it. He told me I was wasting company capital, I said. Harlan shook his head, his face turning serious once more. That man is running a multi-million-dollar ship straight into an iceberg, and he just threw his only captain overboard. Your $85,000 patch isn't expensive, Samuel. It's a masterpiece of engineering. Harlan extended his large hand across the table. Sign the paper, Samuel. Come to Titan. Build your systems here, where people actually respect your mind. I looked at the document, thought of my family, and shook Harlan's hand with a firm, steady grip. I accept, Mr. Reed. The contrast was absolute. In one building, my work was treated like trash. In another, it was recognized as pure gold. As we finished our meal, I knew that on Monday morning, reality was going to hit Apex Logistics like a freight train. On Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I walked into the glass tower of Titan Logistics. My new office was on the 14th floor, featuring a polished wooden desk, warm leather chairs, and a clear view of the city below. Harlan Reed had already set up my security credentials, greeted me with a hot cup of coffee, and introduced me to a tech team that treated me with genuine respect. Meanwhile, across town at Apex Logistics, the working week was beginning in a state of blind, arrogant confidence. Monday marked the start of Apex's annual spring shipping push, the busiest 4-day period of their entire business calendar. Hundreds of major retail stores, grocery chains, and factory suppliers had scheduled their largest cargo movements of the season. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the heavy shipping volume began to flood the network. Without my $85,000 bridge patch running in the background, the legacy database hit an immediate wall. Digital data packets began piling up, like thousands of cars trying to merge into a single narrow lane. By 7:30, the central processing unit reached 100% capacity. Memory banks became completely overwhelmed, and the master database froze solid. Then, the cascade started. Automated dispatch screens went pitch black in regional hubs across 6 states. The system lost track of driver schedules, cargo weights, and delivery addresses. Over 3,000 heavy freight trucks were suddenly left stranded, without digital routing maps. Some drivers were dispatched to wrong states, while others sat idling on loading docks, unable to move tens of millions of dollars in time-sensitive retail goods. Inside Apex headquarters, absolute chaos erupted. Warning sirens flashed red inside the main server room. Phones in the operations department rang non-stop as furious corporate clients demanded to know why their shipments were hours late. Julian Croft panicked. Desperate to prove that he was in control, he marched into the server room wearing his expensive suit. He sat down at the master console, sweating through his shirt, and tried to force a brute force manual override on the frozen database. It was the worst mistake he could have made. Because Julian didn't understand my custom ghost code, the system interpreted his manual override as an external cyber attack. The legacy security software immediately triggered an automated lockdown protocol. It scrambled all internal access passwords and completely locked out every administrative account across the entire corporate network. Now, nobody could log in. The entire company was digitally paralyzed. 4 miles away, I sat at my new desk at Titan Logistics, quietly sipping my morning coffee. My personal cell phone was resting on the desk, vibrating continuously. Dozens of text messages were pouring in from former junior technicians and warehouse workers at Apex. Samuel, the whole network just died. Julian tried to force the core and locked everyone out. We have 800 trucks parked on the highway. The board is screaming, "We need you." I set my coffee down and turned on the wall-mounted television in my office. On the financial news channel, a live red banner flamed across the bottom of the screen. Apex Logistics system collapse causes mass supply chain delays. A news reporter was standing outside Apex headquarters, showing footage of backed-up freight trucks stretched down the road for 2 miles. I felt no urge to laugh. I felt no wild desire to gloat or celebrate. I only felt a deep, calm sense of quiet justice. For years, Richard Sterling and Julian Croft believed that talk was cheap, suits were expensive, and the technical workers who built the foundation were easily replaced. They thought they could disrespect the craftsmen and keep the building standing. Now, reality had arrived to hand them the bill. By Tuesday afternoon, the nightmare at Apex Logistics had turned into an unmitigated corporate disaster. 36 hours had passed since the system blackout began. Apex was losing an estimated $4 million every single day in contractual penalties, missed delivery guarantees, and emergency client payouts. Major national retail clients were publicly terminating their contracts and threatening massive breach of contract lawsuits. The Apex Board of Directors held an emergency closed-door meeting. They gave CEO Richard Sterling a brutal ultimatum: restore the digital network by 5 o'clock that evening, or hand in his immediate resignation. Desperate, cornered, and bleeding money, Richard swallowed his pride and did the one thing he swore he would never do. At 2:15 in the afternoon, my office phone rang at Titan Logistics. The caller ID displayed the main corporate line of Apex headquarters. I picked up the receiver and spoke calmly. Samuel Carter. There was a moment of heavy breathing on the line, followed by a voice I barely recognized. The booming, arrogant tone Richard had used in the boardroom was completely gone. His voice was raspy, shaking, and desperate. Samuel, my boy," Richard stammered, trying desperately to sound friendly. "How are you doing today?" "I'm doing well, Richard," I replied softly. "Look, Samuel," Richard said, his breath hitching. "About last Tuesday in the boardroom, I think there was a huge misunderstanding between us. You know how stressful business gets. We were all under a lot of pressure, and emotions ran high. I may have spoken a bit too harshly. You know I've always valued your dedication to this company." I sat back in my leather chair, listening quietly as the man who humiliated me tried to rewrite history. "The reason I'm calling," Richard continued quickly, "is that we're having a minor technical glitch with the database migration. Julian is a bright young man, but he's not familiar with your older code. I want to invite you back as an emergency temporary consultant for the afternoon. I'll personally approve a consulting fee of $150 an hour." I let the silence stretch over the line for 5 full seconds. "Richard," I said, my tone as cold and smooth as ice, "my consulting rate is no longer open for debate. If I step foot near your system, my fee is $1,000 an hour, with a 50-hour minimum paid upfront into an escrow account." Richard gasped loudly into the phone. $1,000 an hour? Samuel, that's insane. That's extortion. "Take it or leave it," I said softly. Panic overpowered his anger. Fine. I'll have corporate accounting wire $50,000 to an escrow account right now. Just get down here immediately and fix this damn system." I took a slow breath and delivered the fatal blow. "I didn't say I was accepting the job, Richard," I said gently. "I'm declining your offer." The line went dead silent. What do you mean declining?" Richard screeched, his voice cracking with terror. "You have to help us. We are losing millions of dollars every hour." "I can't help you, Richard," I said. "I am currently sitting in my new office at Titan Logistics. I accepted the position of Senior Vice President of Technology here on Thursday night." I heard a sudden, loud thud over the speaker as Richard dropped his telephone handpiece onto his mahogany desk. After several seconds of background shuffling, he scrambled back onto the line, screaming in pure rage. "You traitor! You can't work for Titan. I'll sue you into the ground. You signed non-disclosure agreements. You're sabotaging my company. Check your signed exit paperwork, Richard," I said calmly. "Your legal team gave me 2 months of severance pay and 0 non-compete restrictions because you told them I was an obsolete technician who held no market value. You gave me my complete freedom." Before he could respond, I quietly hung up the phone and placed the receiver back on its cradle. By Wednesday afternoon, the financial floodgates had opened, and Apex Logistics was drowning. Major national retail clients were officially canceling their multi-million-dollar contracts with Apex. They needed a logistics provider who could actually move cargo, and they turned to Titan Logistics. Led by Harlan Reed and myself, Titan stepped in to absorb Apex's largest former clients. I personally presented our infrastructure plan to these stranded retail executives, showing them how my custom routing engine guaranteed complete system stability. Within 24 hours, we onboarded 4 of Apex's biggest corporate accounts, locking them into 5-year exclusive service contracts. Meanwhile, faced with total financial ruin, the Apex Logistics Board of Directors convened an emergency meeting. They needed to know how a $32 million operational crash could happen over an $85,000 software update. Because I was now an executive at Titan and the original architect of the system, the board's lead director invited me to testify via a live video conference call as a third-party expert witness. At 4 o'clock, I logged onto the secure video call. The screen filled with the faces of 11 furious board members. Sitting at the far end of the long boardroom table were Richard Sterling and Julian Croft. Richard looked 10 years older, his expensive silk tie undone and his face pale. Julian was trembling, sweating profusely in his crumpled designer suit, staring blankly at his polished shoes. "Mr. Carter," the chairman of the board said firmly, "we need the truth. Was this crash avoidable?" "It was entirely preventable," I said calmly. I clicked a button on my screen and shared my digital presentation. I didn't raise my voice or offer bitter opinions. I simply presented an undeniable paper trail of facts. I pulled up archived email logs, official risk assessments, and recorded executive meeting notes dating back 4 months. I showed the board the exact technical warnings I had submitted to Richard Sterling and Julian Croft. I displayed the detailed breakdown of the $85,000 bridge patch, proving that it was designed specifically to prevent the exact data collision that destroyed their network. Finally, I displayed the system logs from the previous Tuesday. The logs clearly showed Julian Croft manually deleting the scheduled update to boost his quarterly cost savings report, followed by his disastrous attempt to force a manual override that locked down the entire server matrix. The room erupted into absolute anger. "You deleted the primary security patch!" the chairman shouted, slamming his hand onto the table and glaring at Julian. Julian broke down completely. Tears filled his eyes as he stammered, shaking his hands in panic. It was a mistake. The IT staff gave me bad information. Samuel set me up." He built a system that only he could understand. "Enough!" the chairman roared. "You erased a critical system update to inflate your bonus, and you destroyed this company's reputation. You are fired effective immediately for gross negligence and misconduct. Security will escort you from the building." Julian buried his face in his hands, weeping openly as 2 heavy security guards walked into the room, grabbed him by the arms, and pulled him out of the boardroom. Then the chairman turned his cold gaze toward Richard Sterling. "Richard," the chairman said in a flat, dangerous voice, "you publicly humiliated the man who kept this company alive, ignored explicit technical warnings, and handed our core infrastructure to an incompetent boy. You have cost this firm over $40 million in 3 days." "Gentlemen, please," Richard begged, his hands trembling. "I was trying to save capital. You are stripped of your title as CEO," the chairman interrupted coldly. "You will submit your immediate resignation today, without severance, without stock options, and without a golden parachute. If you refuse, we will sue you personally on behalf of the shareholders." I sat quietly in my office at Titan, watching through the screen as Richard Sterling slumped down into his chair, stripped of his power, his money, and his pride. Reality had delivered the ultimate verdict. 6 months have passed since that explosive board meeting. Today, I am standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my executive office on the 14th floor of Titan Logistics, watching the quiet sun set over the city skyline. The evening sky is painted in bright shades of orange and gold, reflecting off the glass towers below. Under my technical leadership, Titan Logistics has reached record-breaking levels of operational efficiency. We successfully absorbed Apex's former clients, expanded our shipping matrix into 12 new states, and built a modern, rock-solid server network that handles millions of transactions every day without a single glitch. Hard work and competence still matter when you are surrounded by leaders who value truth over empty noise. Every morning, Harlan Reed walks past my office, gives me a nod of genuine respect, and asks about our system performance. Last week, Harlan called me into his office and handed me my annual performance review, along with a substantial profit-sharing bonus check. That bonus completely changed my family's life. My daughter Emily's university tuition is now fully paid in cash for all 4 years. She is thriving in her engineering classes, sitting at the top of her class, and building her own bright future without the burden of student debt. My wife Sarah has access to the very best medical specialists, and her health has improved dramatically over the past few months. Yesterday afternoon, Sarah and I sat at our kitchen table, holding hands as we made the final wire transfer to pay off our home mortgage 20 years early. For the first time in my life, my family is completely secure, safe, and free from financial worry. Apex Logistics is now a faint shadow of its former self. To survive the multi-million-dollar shareholder lawsuits and massive client exit, the board was forced to sell off half their shipping fleet and downsize their staff by 70%. They survive today as a minor, struggling regional carrier, trying to rebuild trust in an industry that has largely moved past them. Richard Sterling was forced out of executive management entirely, his reputation in tatters. Yesterday morning, while checking my professional network online, a notification popped up on my computer screen. It was a private LinkedIn message from Julian Croft. Julian had been blacklisted across the entire logistics industry after news of his gross negligence spread. In his message, the slick MBA talk was completely gone. He sounded small, broken, and desperate. He admitted that he had ruined his career, asking if I could give him a character reference or hire him for an entry-level junior coding position at Titan. I stared at his message for a few long seconds. I didn't feel anger, and I felt no satisfaction in his personal downfall. I simply remembered the arrogant young man who sat in my leather chair and deleted my life's work just to secure a corporate bonus. I quietly clicked the delete button and closed the browser tab without sending a reply. As I look out over the quiet city tonight, holding a warm mug of coffee, I think about the long 22-year journey that brought me to this window. In the modern corporate world, loud men in expensive suits will often try to convince you that talk is worth more than real skill. They will push down the quiet workers who do the actual heavy lifting, ignore the technical warnings, and pretend that institutional knowledge is easily replaced by flashy words and quick shortcuts. But reality doesn't care about corporate titles, slick presentations, or polished speeches. In the end, systems only work when the foundation is solid. True competence never needs to shout, play office politics, or humiliate others to prove its worth. Real skill speaks for itself when the storm arrives, and arrogance will always cost far more than simply paying respect to the quiet people who built the house.